Good morning. Enlightened Stoner here. Had a profound night of dreams. I kind of got right back in the theme that I was thinking about when I fell asleep last night, and that was history. I've been learning a lot about history lately. From one place in particular, I found a channel. It explores history in a different way. She's a musician also, and a history nerd, she calls herself, but it's Eva Schubert. And check out her channel. But it got me thinking about history in general, and I've always known the history is his story. Requires perspective, a personal perspective, his story, the man that told it. Depending on who you're getting the story from, you're going to hear vastly different stories sometimes. So that really sheds a light on what history we've been taught and from what perspective that's coming from, and to really examine the motive for that perspective. And because as we went through history, you can see that perspectives changed pretty rapidly for greater and greater differences in each other. Like these were like stark opposites, night and day. In some cases, one week it's Catholic Reformation, and the next week, no, we're back to Church of England, and so, and deaths to follow accordingly. People's changing opinions and perspectives on things. And who gets left in the middle? The discerning man. Is he going to tolerate all this crap that's going on in the world? He's just trying to get by and live, and he's got to worry about what king wants, what religion, and who's going to die this week for how many people. It really begs the question, the history that we have been told, how much of it we learned that was just fluff from school, and when you learn the real history, it is eye-opening. And I have a feeling that you only get access to that information at certain ages, because you have a inherent faith in things when you're little. You only lose that in later, as life teaches you its lessons. But I mean, I'm not saying we need to, or maybe I am. I don't know why I have like this. No, I'm not even gonna say it. But I don't know what the revisionist is. Is the revisionist a bad thing or a good thing? Is it revising history for better or for worse? Or is it just that it's referring to the term that you can rewrite history and say whatever you want? But I mean, if you want people to believe that they came from certain origins, and you want them to believe that it was, that it was all righteous, or that it was innocent, you're going to tell them a certain version of history that makes you look the most innocent and like or the most, valorous or victorious, or it's the side that wins the war that usually ends up telling the story about it, or that version of the history of that war is the one that's recorded. One being because they absolutely pillage and rape the town afterwards, and they don't care about their culture history, so they don't preserve it, and those people become slaves, and the town just gets rolled into the conquering nation, and it just becomes them then. And that's one reason why it's not preserved, or that may be the only reason why it's not preserved. But either way, it's and if they lost the war but were able to keep their culture or whatever it was, a lot of times the one that won the war is the bigger empire anyway, and so their history is going to survive as the prevailing whatever. It's whether or not that nation dissolves into them or not, their version of the story is going to be the one that continues. So without getting into any crazy accusations or rabbit holes on this one, I'm just going to leave that nugget and just realize that the version of history that you were told, just because it was being told by the victors, doesn't make it righteous. And to be discerning with everything in your life as far as what you're being told, the information, not just what you're being told, the information that you're being given. This kind of leads me into thinking about, she talks a lot about, of course, referring to Ava again, Ava Schubert. Check her out. Fascinating view on history. It's not a different view, it's just a more in-depth. She adds so much emotion, and I don't want to ruin it either. It's fascinating stories. I'm binging it right now for the last couple days. So she just got hours and hours of history, re-examining the history of our religion. That's what got me most drawn into her videos, was talking about the pre-Christ days and what was happening with the governments in that time. And the limited knowledge that I had of that era was from the Bible. It was from the teachings that I had through my church and school. It wasn't from an academic perspective. Understanding better what was going on in the world in the times of Jesus, with Christianity, with everything, and how it shaped to carry even over into the first century. And then I've been following it all the way through. I'm up to 1500 right now. I'm up to Henry VIII, and I don't know, as far as the message here could go so many different ways. I'm touching on topics aspects of our lives that history affects. It doesn't, but at the same time, it can give you a good perspective of where you came from, I guess, so that you can better understand. This is where it gets divisive. It's where the lines get drawn as far as history, religion, what side of the aisle you're on, what version of history do you apply any science to it, or have you gotten to the point where science scares you because it's beginning to be able to explain your religion, and in ways that your religion didn't even have an explanation for, proving to people that aspect of it and having them come to terms with. You know, science is making strides, and I have a feeling it's lost a lot of people because they can't get past the certain part of science. There's a certain advancement, like in the timeline of science and understanding. I think certain people and certain religions, they get to a certain point where they can't acknowledge anything further because that would disagree with their religion. And that sort of thinking goes all the way back to the early days of Catholic Church. It's protecting your story by not acknowledging reality, so that, you know, because it would disprove your story. I'm not trying to beat around the bush here or anything, but I just don't know how deep I want to get into it without having really a good course of in and out. I don't really want to open up any of these right now. I really need. I'm getting nauseous as hell. Speaking of, I'm getting stuffy. I need to, here. Okay, breakfast. I had to go get some yogurt, and I'm gonna make it quick. I don't like calling it parfait. I think there needs to be a better word for it. Breakfast of champions. Okay, I got 5 pieces of tape. Get some tea going. This is a little intermission here because I was just compelled to start talking about history this morning, and then my camera, I was preparing for it, and then it just started recording. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing it now. And then, like, wait a minute, you're hungry. Wait a minute, you didn't make tea. Catching up. Alright. And then we'll finish. There's making a parfait here. Can't really even. There we go. I'll just hold it here while I eat it. Blueberries on there. Gotta have cinnamon. Ooh, that was a lot. I like a lot of cinnamon though. So I'm not gonna eat this whole thing in front of you, but first bite's for you. I'm not gonna be able to talk much while I'm eating, but got about that much left. Okay, tea is poured. I've had a couple spoons of my yogurt. Let's get back into this. So history and perspective and the different versions we can get based on that perspective. So then where's the truth? You could get truth from compiling multiple stories, comparing multiple stories, and then compiling into one whole true story. Ultimately, the person that's compiling history is also telling history. They are compiling the story into their story of what they know to be true or believe to be true based on the perspectives they saw in their time. But then when you follow it up centuries or millennia later, and you realize the guy that did this maybe had no idea the scale to which they would still be using or referring to his contribution. I'm referring to like the King James Bible. He compiled history and basically rewrote it to suit the story that was being perpetuated. It really comes back to being discerning about the motives. What were the motives? King James might have been contested in the time for his views on his understanding of the Bible, but centuries later, that's just the standard. And if you were never told that he's been contested, or that he was contested, whether or not it was righteous, whether or not he was right, whether or not a lot of different things, if you're not even told about the contention, and just, yep, King James made us a Bible, you're going to go along with it without question. Maybe we were told as kids, yeah, the winner gets to tell their version, ha ha ha, and laughed it off that way, but really it was, no, there was nothing left. Like, after they sacked the city, there was no history after that for them, I guess. But righteous people were wiped out in our history too, and their history lost, because the victor didn't see them as valuable or righteous. Throughout our history, the whole idea of needing or having governance, like a king or a noble or any of the hierarchy of those times, our times, but throughout history, how much it became more and more oppressive in the spirit of freedom. I think it was Ben Franklin that said, men who would trade their liberty for freedom deserve neither. I think it was Ben Franklin. Rang true for me, even though I can't remember who said it since I heard it. And that's exactly what's happened. Not saying that in the dark ages people had more liberty than they do now, even though they probably did in some ways. Throughout history, it became more and more oppressive, more and more all-encompassing. There was such a fear of death and dismemberment back then, they really didn't have to invade people's lives like they do now. I mean, that is the most egregious invasion of a life, but the way they invade your personal life now is a lot more technical, unless they expected them to hand in a certain amount of their crops. Oh, and if you don't do that, you'll lose your ears or something. Like, that was what they had to worry about. Now we have to worry about, is the government going to find out that I paid cash for a certain thing, or taxes and all that stuff nowadays. Which there were taxes back then too, which they knew people couldn't pay. And that was the whole idea behind the peasant uprising in Germany in the 1500s. They were getting pushed and pushed and pushed by their noble, and they said, we just can't anymore. You guys are being oppressive for no reason, just to be evil. So you can see how the rich and the nobility throughout history have used the working class and the poor and the misadvantaged and the disadvantaged, and just squeezed the ever-living life out of them. Kept on squeezing and squeezing and squeezing until they couldn't get any more. Just kept feeding off of that source of income. There's people. It's always been through slavery and indentured servitude and all that stuff. Serfdom. It was always, how much can I make off of someone else? Still is. But it doesn't have to be that way. we're finally at a point in time in our technology, in our history, when all that became that unnecessary. We have AI now, we have robots. We're in a new age, but I'm worried that we're bringing old mentalities with us. We need to transcend those old mentalities of the scarcity thing, the idea of that there's finite, realistically there are finite resources available on the planet, but at the same time we have access to all of them, and to hoard them is to create a scarcity, because you're hoarding it for one person, one cause, and one thing only. I think about those nodules, the metals company in Nibiru, and how to try to police it, it would be for Nibiru can't go down there. They don't have the money. They hold a stake to a claim to some of those nodules. That's it. A wealthier company comes in and says, hey, we can go get the nodules for you based on your claim. We'll give you a cut. Great for everyone, right? Until now that country is accountable for holding that company accountable for their practices on the seafloor. And if that country can't even afford to go down there themselves, how can they afford to police and govern this company that's going in on their behalf? They can't. They can't effectively. They're either going to get the runaround or a smoke show or whatever evidence the company wants to provide is really at the company's discretion, because where else are they going to get their information? That's it. It's the companies telling their story, their history. Like, yeah, this is what happened. It's scary because there's so much life down there that we haven't even seen yet, that now we're just going to send down a bunch of giant robot vacuums, suck up all the life that's just been thriving down there. You know, on the flip side of that, you got the countries like Nibiru who would do, well, I can't really say whether they would do the ultimate good or not, and make sure that they're, do it responsibly. But let's say they did. And Nibiru, if they had the money, they'd go down there themselves and get it, and they'd do it responsibly. And they're playing by the rules, or the general guidelines for humanity. It's everyone's ocean, it's everyone's earth. You got places like the U.S. who've never entered into the agreement which renders the international, or the whatever seabed authority, as like they never signed it, basically. So we're not in that thing that says that we have to give a certain portion to certain countries, and we're not in the thing that says you got to do certain practices on the ocean, the seafloor. We don't acknowledge any of that shit. We say, you guys can have your fancy rules, and we're just going to do it our way, which usually ends up happening not at all, which is bad, or with complete disregard for their life on Earth, depending on which side of the aisle you're on. So we have all this technology, all these ways to get nutrition out of our soil. And so we don't need to work as hard as we have. Our days of working in the traditional sense are largely over. We're gonna constantly keep making machines to do the things that we don't want to do or can't do, and it's gonna keep getting better. And as it progresses, those people will go from being the ones doing the work to being the ones working on the machines. But it begs the question, when is it enough? When are there going to be enough billionaires? You'd be like, oh, yeah, maybe that's not so special anymore. Millionaires. Everyone's a millionaire. The inflation and the currency, just what they do to manipulate our currency. And we're always the one left holding the bag. Like, no matter what is done, we feel the end of everything. We're the start because we're the originators of it, and we're the end because it always ends up coming down to who's going to be sacrificing the most and being in the place of the most discomfort. The person doing the work, the people calling the shots for the people doing the work, are just sitting there collecting their millions. Price of stuff goes up because some dude needs new cushions on his yacht. Not that they itemize things like that or budget that way. Some dude gets new cushions on his yacht, and your grande frappuccino is now $6 instead of $5 or whatever it is. The cost always ends up getting transferred to us. You know, what are you gonna do about it? You're down here generating the actual precious items, like the work. You're putting in your energy, you're turning something for it. You're also down here trying to survive too, because you're giving up all of your time that you could be doing whatever else, living your own purpose, doing on your own mission, like fulfilling your own life purpose. Instead, you're filling someone else's. When you're in that situation, you're contributing towards their life goals and their purpose, not yours. And so, obviously, you're going to get pennies for what your true potential is really worth. And they make out on you. But the numbers are absolutely astonishing. How throughout our history, how long it took to get to the first billionaire, and then from wherever, and then whenever it started to rise exponentially, the number of billionaires, and it's just compounding at this point. It's never going to go backwards in trend. So I don't even know if my messages have a grand theme yet. History. That's what it was. We started talking about history. And when you find yourself in the middle of it, which side are you on? The question for the week.